At least 28 civilians have been killed and 54 were injured in an Israeli bombing of a school housing displaced people west of the Palestinian side of Rafah. Israeli occupation forces continue their aggression on the Gaza Strip by land, sea and air since October 7, 2023. That came as the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the crimes of genocide and displacement committed by the Israeli occupation forces in the Gaza Strip in general and in the north in particular. At least 55 Palestinians have been killed and 166 others injured in Israeli attacks in the last 24 hours. Palestinian medical sources reported that Palestinian death toll from Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has now surged to more than 42,000 and more than 97,000 others injured. Local media sources have reported that the Israeli occupation forces withdrew from Al-Farah camp south of Tubas after storming the camp for about 10 continuous hours. Israel raided several homes, committed violations against ambulance crews, detained a number of citizens and caused extensive destruction to infrastructure and citizens' property. For the fifth consecutive day, Palestinian civilians in Jabalia camp in northern Gaza have been facing genocide. Israeli occupation forces imposed a land blockade, carried out killings, blew up homes and forced displacement. Local media sources stated that civilians refused to be displaced to the south despite intense pressure and threats. Antonio Guterres has made a strong appeal for an immediate ceasefire both in Gaza and Lebanon.
Every airstrike, every missile launch, every rocket fired pushes peace further out of reach and makes the suffering even worse for the millions of civilians caught in the middle. That is why we cannot and will not give up on our calls for an immediate ceasefire both in Gaza and Lebanon, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the immediate life-saving aid to all those who desperately need it. And that is why we cannot and will not give up on our calls for irreversible action for a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine.
Meanwhile, China's permanent representative to the UN, Fu Kong, has called for Israel to cease military actions in Gaza, lift the blockade and allow humanitarian access. He also criticized Israeli disregard for international humanitarian law. He condemned Israel's intensified operations in the West Bank, which threaten the two-state solution. Fu also warned against escalating tensions in Lebanon, urging all parties to seek a ceasefire, while also emphasizing the need to address the diminishing authority of the Security Council in conflict resolution. The United States Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has called on Israel to urgently address the catastrophic conditions in the besieged Gaza Strip.
These catastrophic conditions were predicted months ago and yet have still not been addressed. That must change, and now. We call on Israel to take urgent steps to do so. And I reiterate the United States' expectation that Palestinian civilians, including those evacuated from the north, be permitted to return to their communities and rebuild. Consistent with Resolution 2735, there must be no demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip, including any actions that reduce the territory of Gaza.